Hi there my friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all keeping well. About a week ago I decided I hadn't done any sketching in a while and I just felt like filling a sketchbook spread. But I wanted to do it slightly different, and obviously sketchbooks, they're there for being creative, coming up with ideas and solutions that you haven't come up with before. And I wanted to introduce some lettering into this sketchbook spread. So I knew I was going to need a book about fonts or something on the internet to help me get some ideas. So the book I actually got a few ideas from, I'll pop in the description below. Got out my Chromaflow pencils and a Faber-Castell coloured sketching pencil, they are erasable, and a Derwent white, and yes, coffee. Then I got out my iPad and using Procreate began designing some lettering. So this font doesn't exist as far as I'm aware, but when I put the Puffins word at the bottom, that font was just straight off the iPad. So there you go, really quick way of doing it on the iPad. Can erase any mistakes and then I can print it out, transfer the print onto my sketchbook, and away we go. So the sketchbook I'm using is the Talens Art Creations sketchbook, 8.3 inches by 11.7 inches. The paperweight is £94 and you get a whopping 80 pages in the sketchbook. So plenty of room to make mistakes and turn over to a new page if you need to. Just think the sketchbook is just for you, just a place to have some fun, experiment and just, well, relax really. So once I got the word Arctic and Puffins down onto the page, I then painted over the lettering with this white gouache. Now it's acrylic gouache by Holbein. So I knew once it was dry, and I dried it with a hairdryer, so once it was dry, set in place, not going anywhere at all. So don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole word live on camera, because that would be literally as boring as watching paint dry. Well, you would be watching paint dry. So I've just sped it up a little bit and I dried it with a hairdryer between layers. So that was the first layer and I was quite happy with it, that's fine. Then this paint is a Liquitex acrylic ink and it's iridescent bright silver, and I'll link everything below. And all I wanted to do was just get a line down the centre of each letter with the white edging, and I thought that would work really well. So you can see layer 1 going on of the silver paint, the silver ink, and it's quite patchy. But I'm just going through the motions here just so I could record and let you see how I actually did everything. Then using a Chromaflow pencil, sharpened to a nice point, just going round the edges. Now I'll tell you right now that I do go back in and I tidy up the silver, put another layer of silver, and I go back on with the white as well and tidy up the edges. And once I'd done that, then I was happy with the lettering. And keep it in mind, it's just a sketchbook. And I didn't have to share it on YouTube, I didn't have that in mind. I always, well, 9 times out of 10 have my camera running now while I'm working. But I thought, you can see it all, the ugly stage and the finished piece, which didn't look that ugly, to be honest. So there it is, that's fine. And there's the Holbein white acrylic gouache and the Liquitex acrylic ink in iridescent bright silver. Now as you can see, the paper in these sketchbooks is cream coloured, and this pencil I'm sketching with is quite a light blue. So just bear with me just for this part of the video. The sketching starts off looking quite misty because it's hard to see, but soon I go a little bit darker and then it's more visible what I'm doing. So I'm looking at reference images that I took in the Arctic back in 2023. And I just wanted to get a feel for these puffins. They're bigger, or they seem to be bigger than the ones we get here in the UK. They're more sort of like Puffins on steroids. They're more robust looking, and I just wanted to capture that in the sketch. So to begin with, I'm looking for the largest shapes in the reference image, so whether that's ovals or circles, ovals, even rectangles or triangles, I'm looking for those shapes, and in my mind I'm sketching around those shapes just to fill in the space. Negative space plays a big part in sketching as well, as in the distance between the back of the wing and the back of the neck, that V shape, and what size is that in relation to other parts of the reference image. So keeping all that in mind, I slowly but surely get a sketch down for the first puffin out of 3, and I sketched all 3 exactly the same way. Now I personally like to sketch really lightly to begin with, get some guidelines in, and then tighten those guidelines up by going darker the more comfortable I am with the positioning and the composition of the drawing. The tissue I'm using is just blurring things out slightly. It dulls the pencil line down instead of erasing it away. The thing is, if you put an initial sketch line down and then erase it, very often what you'll find is you'll do exactly the same again, because there's nothing to say, no, don't do it that way. But if you've got a sketch line down that's wrong, sketch on top of it, around it and over it, and then remove the one underneath that's wrong. I hope that makes sense. Else you'll end up, or you can end up, sketching the same mistake line again and again. And it all just comes down to practice. I love sketching, and I'm sorry the lighting isn't better in this little piece of the video, this little sketching piece, but I was actually sketching with a headache, so I didn't want the really bright lights, the filming lights on it just at this point. So you can see the little sketch coming together, and these pencils, they come in 24 colours I think, and they are erasable. I don't use the eraser that's on the end of the pencil though. I always use a putty eraser or a white nylon eraser. And you'll see me come in from time to time during this video with a mono eraser, and I'll link everything in the description. So just putting a few details in. I don't want these sketches, once they're finished, to be detailed. It's just a sketchbook. I'm not going to be doing anything with this. In actual fact, these sketches initially were because I had in mind a nice big painting of Arctic puffins, and that's what I do have in mind. So best way to get to know a subject is to sketch it, play with it first. So just by doing these sketches in a sketchbook, I'm getting to know my subjects, I'm getting to know the reference images that I'm going to be using for a bigger painting as well, and that all helps. So hopefully when I come in with a canvas and some paint, I think it's probably going to be acrylic or oil over acrylic, then I'll be more comfortable straight away, and hopefully will have answered in my mind a lot of the questions I might have about the reference images of these birds. So slowing down the video slightly now and beginning to add colour. So Derwent Chromaflow, I am an ambassador for Derwent, so these materials were sent to me. I just want to make that clear, but in no way am I biased. They are a fantastic pencil. They're very soft, but you can sharpen them to a point, and 9 times out of 10 they will retain that point for quite a while. They blend well together, and they work really well in these sketchbooks. Well, in actual fact, on any paper, I've never had a problem with them. The problem comes if you're working on professional works that you're wanting to sell, or, well, you could exhibit your works with these pencils, but because of the light fast properties, or the lack of light fast properties on these pencils, because they vary so much within the range, I probably wouldn't be selling artwork made with these. If I'm going to produce a coloured pencil piece, I'd rather use the light fast range by Derwent. But these are fantastic. They really give a punch of colour whenever I need it. They layer up tremendously well, and as you'll see later on in the video, they blend very well with odourless mineral spirits too. So just popping in there with a Derwent Chinese white. That's the whitest, softest coloured pencil that I've ever found, and I use it in a lot of my projects. So when working with coloured pencil, I always find it better to go light to begin with and gradually build up your layers, because the last thing you want is for you to run out of tooth. Now, if you don't know what tooth is, it's the texture of any given paper. Some papers will have a lot of tooth and some papers will have very little. If you think of a piece of printer paper, that will have very little tooth at all, but a piece of, say, rough watercolour paper will have lots of tooth, probably too much for coloured pencil, because then the coloured pencil will just be hitting the peaks of the tooth, and you'll find it difficult to get the pigment down into the troughs in between the peaks, if that makes sense. But a smooth drawing paper like this in this sketchbook is ideal, and I didn't find I ran out of tooth at all. But saying again, I was layering up very gradually, starting with lighter colours in areas where I wanted a little bit of light to shine through, and for the lighter colours to shine through. So layering and layering and layering. And these pencils, the Chromaflow pencils, they're available in tins, in sets, but they're also available open stock, which is wonderful. So if you buy a big set of these coloured pencils and you find that one pencil in particular is your favourite and it's wearing down to a little nub, we've all been through that, thankfully you don't have to buy the whole set again. You can just buy that one colour again. Or if you don't want to or can't afford to buy a whole set to begin with, you can just go on Derwent website and just purchase one or just a handful of colours and start your collection out that way, or buy a few just to see if you like them. And that goes with, I believe, all of Derwent's paints and pencils, that they're all available open stock. So just gradually building up some colour, and the colours were not representational of the reference images. I played about with artistic license a little bit, bringing in lilacs and blues and things like that. The few days that I photographed Puffin while in the Arctic, it was overcast, so the puffins looked dull and different shades of grey really. But it's just nice. It's a sketchbook, is for playing. It's just some you time. As you saw, I've got my cup of coffee going and a podcast on, or a YouTube video was on or something, and it's just nice just to sit and relax. And once your headache's gone, there's nothing like sitting and relaxing with a sketchbook. Sorry about my hair floating into the view there. It does go out of frame in a minute, thankfully. That's the only trouble with working on something smallish, I guess. And I have propped it up on a little stand, little wicker box, just so it's tilted towards me, so I don't have to have my head hovering right over the paper 24/7. So we're leaving the eye for a minute. We'll come back to the eye in a minute, and just getting some lighter portions popped in first. And really the whole first stages of me filling in this little puffin were just blocking in where are my darks going to go, where are the lights going to go, and where are the intermediate tones going to go. Sort of like this. So underneath the chin it's very dark, the light's coming in from the right hand side, but not a pinpoint of light. So in nature, as everywhere else I guess, colours are reflective, and they'll be reflecting the colour from the sea, but they'll also be, and the sky, and the sun, but they'll also be reflecting the colours and the light. So there's a lot of play going on with light and colour, and it's just nice for once you open up your sketchbook to do the same, just have a play. You could sketch the same subject in multiple positions or in the same position and just experiment with the light coming in from different sides, or from the top, or even up from the bottom. And then you could also play with the same subject in the same position if you wish, with different colours as well. So we always think of puffins when you see them out at sea through a pair of binoculars. They're small little birds, and you just think, oh, black and white with a colourful beak. But when you get up close to them, because they have got a lot of darker plumage, and that is very reflective of different colours, so it's just nice just to have some fun and throw some colour in there. We all need colourful lives, don't we? We need some colour in our lives. Don't want to live in black and white, even if it is splashed with a little bit of a colourful beak. So working the pencil round and round in tiny circles for the majority of the time, and that's so I don't get any harsh lines accidentally placed, unless I want them, which is just there where the feathers are splitting. But when I'm starting off and I'm applying these really light layers, I'm doing it very light-handedly, because again I don't want to damage the tooth of the paper. Now when it comes to the final layers of colour that you're laying down, then yes, you can go on a little bit more heavy-handedly, and that's called burnishing. That's when you really apply a lot of pressure, a lot of pigment, hence a lot of colour, onto the page, and it flattens the tooth of the paper. Now only do that when you know you're not going to want to add anything else on top, because it really does flatten the tooth of the paper, and then that part of the paper won't be able to take any more pigment in the future. So at this point I knew I had to get my head right over the top of that drawing, just so I could see what I was doing, because that area, as you can see, the size of the pencil and the size of the eye is small. So I don't know if I might have, oh no, I thought I was going to skip forward through the video then, but I haven't. So just applying a little bit of colour around the edges, a little bit of colour in the centre, and I had to skip that frame because my head was in the way. But the head and the beak, that's just the starting point. I don't go back to the eye, except to add a little bit of a highlight with the white acrylic ink, but the head and the beak I do go back and start building up some more layers later on. So as you can see, it's a rinse and repeat process. I'm just getting a feel for the colour of the bird, where the lights are, where the darks are going, and making sure I'm not forgetting the form of the bird as well. So it's quite easy when you're sketching from a reference image to end up with an image, a finished image that looks quite flat. So that's where differences in light and shadow and things like that come into play, and colour, but also not forgetting that what you're actually trying to reproduce is a living thing. So going in now with the next layer of pigment. So this is where you can go really dark, and if you're looking at a painting or a drawing and you're thinking, oh, my lights just aren't light enough, then 9 times out of 10 it's because whatever is next to it isn't dark enough. So at the moment, and you've got to remember I'm working on a cream coloured paper, the cheek of the puffin looks quite dark, but as I begin to build up these layers, these intense layers of dark blue and dark purple, the whiter part of the cheek starts to look brighter. Obviously it will never look as white as that little piece of paper sticking out the top of the sketchbook, but it does look brighter than it did before, and that's because we're going darker right next to it. And the same goes vice versa. So if something in your painting should be dark and it's not looking dark enough, then maybe whatever's next to it isn't light enough. Now the reason I have a piece of white cardstock underneath this sheet that I'm working on is because when I start applying more pressure on the pencil, I don't want it denting the page, the next page of the sketchbook. Obviously there might be some denting on the back of this page, but that's fine, I can use paint or something on that side, but I don't want it to cause any damage to the underlying page beneath this one. And you can use a piece of cardstock, or you could use a piece of silicone, or even a chopping board, a very, very thin plastic chopping board, as long as it's not textured. Anything like that. So sorry I'm going off the frame there, but just glazing this colour over. And as you can see on the wing, I went backwards and forwards, building up the lights, and then the darks, and then the lights again, just gradually building it up. Now going down this side of the chest and stomach, I didn't want a really definite line of where that part of the anatomy ends and the paper, you know, the plain paper begins. So by moving my hand right the way back on the pencils and making sure they have a decent point on them as well, I could apply quite a bit of pigment but without applying any pressure. Excuse me. And just by going round and round in circles, well, ovals actually, you can just build up the pigment on the paper and not apply any pressure where you don't want to. So the more pressure you want to apply, move your hand towards the tip of the pencil. The less pressure you want to apply, move your hand further back along the pencil. Sorry if you can hear that, my phone's going off. And I've switched it off because it was just sales calls. Not sales as in good sales, I mean sales as in anonymous numbers and trying to get you to buy things. Anyway, back to the drawing. So working it with pinks, lilacs. One of the blues actually is called periwinkle, one of the light blues, and it's lovely. It's a really lovely mix of just enough blue, just enough pink to make it a bluish purple. It's really pretty. So just layering up slightly, and as with the cheek of the puffin, I'm actually leaving part of the chest or the side of the chest of the puffin clear of any pencil as well. So now we're going to be mapping out the darks and lights again on this wing, just as we did on the wing at the back of the drawing. And I did the whole sketchbook spread over about 3 days, so there was around about 3 hours of footage that I trimmed down just to 35 minutes. So it's 3 hours doesn't sound very long, does it, to fill a sketchbook spread? But I don't want to say the word tedious, because it's not, because I really enjoyed doing this piece, but it's slow. It's a slow process working with pencils as opposed to a paintbrush, because you're working with that tiny tip of a pencil, or the side of a pencil, filling quite a large area really. So it does take time, and it is nice just to have, I don't know, an audio book or some music or a podcast or YouTube video or something playing in the background, as long as it's not going to refocus your mind away from your project. No. Some people have the TV on and films playing and things like that. I couldn't do that. I think that would be far too distracting. But a YouTube video, podcasts, audio books, you know, your favourite book maybe on audio that you've read 100 times before, just so you're not too absorbed in it. Things like that work really well to relax you and just enable you to stay put for just a little bit longer. So sometimes the temptation is I want to get up and make another coffee, which I do quite often. Obviously I've got a dog to walk, so I split up my studio time walking Honey, and also there's other jobs need doing in the studio as well, apart from working in sketchbooks and having fun. I mean, it's all fun, but some more fun than others. So I've now blocked in that wing for now. So I'm just moving across to get a few details in and a little bit of shadowing and keeping my eye on my reference image. So you may think you know what feathers clumped together look like, but don't ignore your reference image. As I said right at the beginning, I didn't want anything really detailed in this sketchbook. I just wanted to get a feel for the birds that would be later painting bigger and on a canvas. So I just wanted shapes really, just to get to know the shapes, the form of the birds, movement of the birds, and obviously experimenting with colour. And yes, it is easier to experiment with colour with paint, because if you're working in acrylics or an acrylic gouache, then if you do a colour and you don't like it, you can go over it once it's dry and cover it up. So that is another way if you want to work in a sketchbook. You could work with acrylic inks or acrylic gouaches, or anything really that you can cover up. You can cover up certain amounts with watercolours, but then yeah, you're moving into the territory of normal gouache, and then you've got the problems of them lifting if you re-wet them too much. So if you want to have a play with colours and you're not sure, then go with acrylics, I guess, or an acrylic gouache. So starting to darken some of the feathers now. And this again isn't the finished layer. So just looking at my reference image, where's the light catching on this wing? What would be reflecting up from the sea, and what light? And now comes the Odourless mineral spirits. I keep it in a little mason jar with cotton wool bedded in there and a few drips of the Odourless mineral spirits in there, and then when you dip your brush in, you just wipe your brush literally onto the cotton wool so it doesn't pick up too much. Blot it off a little bit on a piece of tissue paper, and then you can apply it to your painting. And you have to let this dry naturally. It doesn't take long. This took 5 minutes at the most to dry, but it blends the pigments. It dissolves the pigments of the pencils. Doesn't make them act like paint, but it just softens the effect somewhat and blends them down into the tooth of the paper. And that way you can apply even more layers. So I've applied some more layers once it was dry, and just going in with some final darks on this part of the wing now. So this isn't black that I'm using, it's called slate grey, I think is the one I'm using. It's a very, very dark blackish blue. And it's just helping me just get those few feather details along the bottom edge just a little bit darker than I had them before. And in actual fact, this image on screen now is looking a little bit lighter than it is in real life. So the darks are quite a bit darker in real life, but obviously I need the studio lighting on quite harsh for you to be able to see what I'm doing, because you saw what happened at the beginning when I was sketching and I didn't have the studio lights on. Everything looks a bit dull and dreary and hard to see. So going in, and as you can see, they do keep a nice sharp point. Oh no, this pencil's called Deep Sea. I've just noticed it. So it's not the slate grey. Rewind, rewind. This is the Deep Sea. Very, very dark blue. Leaning towards purple, so it's that kind of blue. So just getting a nice touch. Oh, the little pencil thing you can see on the top right hand corner, that's a Tombow Mono eraser. It's like, a retractable eraser, and that works well with the coloured pencils. You can actually lift little portions of the coloured pencil out Not if you've activated it with the Odourless mineral spirits though. Once you've activated a colour with that, it permanently stains the paper, so you can't actually lift it back out. So this is the Derwent Chinese white coloured pencil. Wait, I think it's called a drawing pencil. They've just increased their range of these drawing pencils to 72, I believe. And they all come in muted tones. The original box set was 24 colours, but they've increased to 72, and they are extremely soft. As I said at the beginning, I believe I said it anyway, this is the whitest, softest coloured pencil that I've found. And as you can see, I'm using it with quite a light hand. I don't want any harsh white marks going in now, because it's just meant to be, you know, a sketch in a sketchbook, and it's so easy to get carried away. And that's the deep sea again, so going back on and darkening it even more. It's weird, isn't it, when you stand back from a painting or drawing and get a different view, you just sometimes see where things need to be altered slightly. And I stood up a couple of times, just had a look from, you know, a foot away or so, and it just gives you a different view. A bird's eye view always helps when you're standing back a little bit. Also, looking in the viewfinder of my camera helps as well, and taking photos now and again on my phone helps. It somehow, seeing it shrank down on a digital form, smaller, just helps you see what needs to be done and what can be left alone, really. And again, as I said right at the beginning, there's 80 pages in this sketchbook, so there's no harm in not finishing something or starting something again. It's just all about growing your skills, honing your talent and having fun. So again, wanting to take it even darker around this area. And showing that it's Derwent Chromaflow there, but I can't see the colour. Just tidying up the edges. And it's really hard to see on here, isn't it? But it is making a difference. Just a slight and delicate darkening in certain places. And that edge, that bottom edge of it, it just needed, I didn't want it to be crystal clear and cut, too defined, but just needed it to be a little bit tidier than it was. Maybe I was just being pickety because I was coming towards the end. And then just putting a few feathery details in. So a little bit of shadowing between these feathers. And if you can hear snoring, it's Honey in a bed about 4 feet away from me. We've just got back from a nice long walk and she's shattered. And I don't want to disturb her by shouting, "Stop snoring." I only do that to my husband. No, don't. So just putting some markings on to resemble the edges of feathers, but again, nothing too defined, wanting to keep it soft. And I do think the sketchbook spread as a whole has ended up with quite a soft look. But it was really nice with this sketchbook spread just to add a bit of lettering. My handwriting is legible, there's nothing wrong with that, but when it comes to fancy handwriting, I've had a go, and wow, those artists that do it for a living, they're amazing. That's why I reached for my iPad to design the word Arctic. And then the word Puffins, that's, I believe I said at the beginning, that's one of the fonts that is already on the iPad. And the word was designed using Procreate, an app that you can download onto your iPad. And you can also get Procreate Pocket for your phone as well. And there you have it. Double spread. Arctic Puffins, worked from my own references, taken in August 2023 in the Arctic. And there's the pencils safely nestled on a little towel so they don't roll off the table. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed that. Thank you and bye for now.